Beautiful.
All right. Hi, everyone. So this is our group behavior change project. In this group, we have Allison, Emma, Courtney, and myself, Nicole. To start with, I just wanted to give you guys a few facts. So an average of about 5% or fewer adults reach the recommended dose of physical activity. Researchers report that 50% of Americans do not engage in enough physical activity, and an alarming 29% do not engage in physical activity at all. The purpose of the following study is to examine the effectiveness of token economy systems on the amount of steps taken daily in graduate students. The study was conducted over the course of 4 weeks, which totaled in 20 sessions. The Center for Disease Control and Prevention put out a statement recommending that adults engage in a minimum of 150 minutes of moderate physical activity per week. This can be achieved by splitting the time you exercise across multiple days, and the most practical way to reach 150 minutes is by exercising 5 days a week for 30 minutes. By participating in at least the minimum time, you can lower your risks of getting heart disease, hypertension, type 2 diabetes, osteoporosis, and different types of cancers. Approximately 50% of structured exercise programs fail due to individuals' inability to fully comply with a program. Structured exercise fails for many reasons, like being too time-consuming, requiring a person to go to the gym, needing gym equipment, and they can be expensive depending on the program. People also argue that exercising can be too strenuous to do on a daily basis. For this reason, lifestyle approaches to exercises have been suggested as a means to increase physical activity. This kind of approach decreases the amount of effort needed to exercise, and it eliminates the need to designate specific time for exercise, which means it can be done during leisure time. Walking is one that ranks amongst the most. The simplicity, convenience, and the monetary efficiency of walking gives adults the opportunity to engage in it more frequently than any other exercise. There are many health benefits associated with walking: reduced blood pressure, lower body mass index, and decreased size in waist and hip circumference. To get the health benefits associated with walking, 10,000 steps per day must be walked, and this equals to engaging in at least 30 minutes of physical activity. Several studies in the past have been conducted using various interventions to see whether or not it is effective in increasing physical activity. Supporting research in a study conducted by Courtney and Dallery reported the use of pedometers, websites, and virtual coaching proved to help maintain higher levels of activity. Van Warmer used a pedometer in e-counseling to increase physical activity and monitor weight loss in adults, and his results showed that all participants increased the amount of steps taken per day, and half of the participants were able to maintain these levels even after the study concluded. In this study, pedometers proved to be effective, practical, and accurate tools for measuring steps and fostering motivation. Courtney also employed a study to increase physical activity in adults, and that was using contingency management. The intervention was internet-based, and it used Fitbits to track steps, calories, and distance traveled. And evidence from this study displayed that internet-based intervention, in fact, increased walking to the CDC's recommended physical activity goal of 10,000 steps per day, but it was more effective when used in conjunction with contingency management. Token economies, which is a reward exchange system that uses tokens, tickets, etc., as a form of currency to exchange for desired reinforcers. A study conducted by Allison measured the effectiveness of token economies on physical activity in second graders. His supporting evidence showed that the effectiveness of using tokens increased walking and time for the 1 mile walk and jog. Another study conducted by Bennett and colleagues corroborated this, as well as the study conducted by Todd and Reed. Back to the Allstat study, He had tokens being delivered by peers, as well as peer assessment of performance. And results from the study showed that peer-administered token reinforcement proved to be a motivating element, and peer assessment proved to be effective in individuals as young as second grade. For our study, we replicated the article using token reinforcement to increase walking for adults with intellectual disability. And the purpose of this study was to determine the effectiveness of token reinforcement in increasing distance walked for adults with intellectual disabilities. This study resulted in an increase of distance walked in participants through the use of token economy. And the study provided stronger evidence that supports the articles below. So in the previous slides, we discussed Bennett et al. And Croce and Hovart, which was cited in this particular article, did a study where they delivered tokens at the end of each session if the frequency and duration was met, which is a form of contingency management, which was also discussed previously. And this demonstrated an increase in exercising. Todd and Reed also used a token board, but they use it as a self-monitoring tool, and this helps sustain elevated levels of physical activities in individuals with autism. Our study is going to examine the effectiveness of token economy systems as well as the study that we just discussed, except we will be measuring steps and not distance walked. And Courtney will be discussing the rest of our study in further detail.
So I'll be discussing the methods that we used to replicate the study. The participants used in this study are all enrolled in Ball State University's master's program in applied behavior analysis. All the participants are female, with 3 of them being Caucasian and 1 African American. The participants were Allison, Baylis, age 24, Emma Selke, age 27, Nicole Udeh, age 23, and Courtney Weise, age 34. All the participants reside in an Eastern Standard Time zone, and they were all randomly assigned to this group at the beginning of the semester. Each participant stated at the beginning of the study that they were able to walk without difficulty, which was a prerequisite to the study. Also, all participants stated that they had access to a computer with internet access and a cell phone, which was also needed for the study. The study took place during the hours of 8 a.m. to 11 a.m. at each participant's place of work, Monday through Friday. The materials needed for the study were a U-Track pedometer, which each participant purchased from Amazon prior to the start of the study. The participants also needed to have a computer with internet access in order to enter the number of steps walked into an electronic data sheet, which was compiled using the Google Drive and Google Docs. The computers were also needed to hold weekly group meetings via Google Hangouts to discuss inter-observer agreement, treatment fidelity, and to discuss triumphs and difficulties during the study. Cell phones were needed to send pictures to the inter-observer agreement partner to track the number of steps and to track the inter-observer agreement. The cell phones were also used to receive praise via text from their partners when the highest number of steps were reached. A preference assessment was also completed prior to the intervention phase to determine what highly preferred item would be that each participant would be working towards. The behavior definition for walking was any occurrence of forward, backward, upward, downward, or sidewards motions of a foot that the pedometer tracks as a step. Some non-examples of walking would be the pedometer is broken and inaccurately recording the number of steps or failing to record the number of steps walked. Data collection was obtained via the use of the U-Tracked pedometer. Each participant sent a picture of the pedometer to their inter-observer agreement partner and inputted the number of steps walked into a data collection sheet located on a Google Doc in the group's shared Google Drive. On the document, information such as the participant's name, the number of steps walked each day, The weekly average per participant and the number of tokens needed to access reinforcement was collected on that document. The research design of the study was an AB-AB design. The baseline data was collected for 5 days. The intervention data was then collected for 5 days following the baseline. A return to baseline data was collected the following 5 days, and a return to intervention was completed for 5 days, with a total of 20 days of data collection. During baseline, each participant monitored the target behavior of walking beginning on September 17, 2018 through September 21, 2018 for a total of 5 days. Data was collected between the hours of 8 a.m. to 11 a.m. Monday through Friday. The U-track pedometer was attached to each participant's waistband on their pant leg. An interview and preference assessment was conducted to determine each participant's highly preferred item to use during the intervention phase. A return to baseline phase was then conducted October 8, 2018 to October 12, 2018, totaling 5 days. During the intervention phase, each participant monitored the target behavior of step counts during the weekdays beginning September 24, 2018 to October 5, 2018, totaling 5 days. Again, this was collected during the hours of 8 a.m. to 11 a.m. Monday through Friday at each participant's place of employment. The U-track pedometer was again attached to the waistband of their pant leg. And after every 405 steps, a token was given for those steps. When a personal best was reached, the group would share the personal best via group text message, and social praise was provided to that participant. After each session, the step count was reset to 0 to eliminate an accumulation of steps. The token exchange rate was then based on each participant's baseline's weekly average. A return to treatment phase was conducted October 15, 2018 to October 19, 2018, totaling another 5 days.
She's on the class.
IOA data was collected by sending pictures of the pedometers to a participant, which was an inter-observer agreement partner. The inter-observer agreement data was collected using a total count inter-observer agreement where we divided the smaller count by the larger count, multiplied by 100 to get a total count inter-observer agreement percentage. The total count inter-observer agreement for each date that was collected was 100%. The inter-observer agreement data for the source study was collected by recording the number of laps. The researcher and the independent observer for the source study collected the inter-observer agreement. Inter-observer agreement was calculated by dividing the smaller number of laps by the larger number of laps and converting that result to a percentage. And that percentage for the source study was 99.6%. Treatment integrity was collected using a treatment fidelity checklist. On this checklist, we answered questions such as, was the token amount calculated for the day? Was the inter-observer agreement data completed for the week? Did the equipment function correctly? This was maintained through the weekly group meetings via the Google Hangout, and we discussed each step of the study, answered the questions on the fidelity checklist, and reviewed treatment fidelity. Our treatment fidelity score was 100% according to the checklist. Here's the checklist. Next, we're going to discuss our results. This is a result of my data. My baseline average was 1,740 steps walked. My intervention average was 1,942 steps walked. My return to baseline average was 1,566 steps walked, and my return to intervention was 2,119 steps walked. My graph was inconclusive because the data was very variable. However, the averages do show a change between baselines and interventions.
All right, so next we're going to take a look at my graph for my data that I took on my step count. The first baseline phase stays in the mid 2000s for step count, and then when the token economy intervention is implemented, the step count increases ever so slightly into the upper 2000s, although there is a little overlap in data. Now going forward into the second baseline phase, the step count per day drops drastically into the low 2000 to upper 1000s. The reasoning for this is that I actually got promoted at my job and had to attend several meetings that week in the mornings instead of being with clients when I was up walking around. So my ability to get up and walk was limited, which shows in my data points. Because of this, we see an increase then when we go into the last intervention phase. The average step count from all of my phases was 2,619 steps. The step count ranged from 1,872 to 2,923 steps. There's a little variability in my data, but overall it's relatively stable. From examining my graph, we see that there is a functional relationship between the intervention of token economy and step count for my particular graph.
Next is my graph. So as you can see by looking at my graph, there's a clear functional relationship between the intervention phase and my steps walked. My average amount of steps walked was 1,971, and my average range was 775 to 2,829. You can see by looking at my graph that I was very motivated by the pedometer, and as in the research, pedometers show that they are a motivating factor because you can look at them. They serve as an environmental prompt. So this is demonstrated in my intervention phases. And in my baseline phases, you can see that once the pedometer was not worn and not served as an environmental prompt, the amount of steps walked decreased extremely. Also in my data, you can see that the days that I walked less have a trend. And these are the days where I didn't have a client that was as, I wouldn't say difficult, but didn't require as much running or chasing after.
All right, so this is my data. My data is obviously very variable, and this is due to a very variable work schedule. Some days I would actually be driving during the times that we were supposed to be taking our steps, and some days I wouldn't. And you can kind of see that there's a trend in the days where I was walking less. Due to my variability in my data, we can't really draw any conclusions. The average at the end of the treatment was actually higher. My total average was 613, and my total range was 211 to 1,471. So after looking at this, we can't really draw a conclusion from my graph as well either. These are a table of everybody's ranges. Like I said, everybody's averages at the end of the treatment phases were higher than their baselines. So that did show an increase of steps, but as we said, our graphs did not necessarily show that there was a functional relation for two of us. And as I said, two of us, there was a functional relation, and that would be Allison and Nicole. There's, for Allison's at the end, there was a big increase. So that showed a clear relation that there was a big drop in the baseline and then an increase. For Nicole's, it kind of showed it throughout the whole graph. As for Allison's and I's, our work schedule is very variable, and so we couldn't really draw any conclusions for that. Going forward, we might have to conduct the treatment phases for longer and in a more controlled environment in order to take out the limitations that we had due to our work schedule or the other limitations that we had that Allison will talk about in a second. And then overall, we decided that the token economy system could be used to increase the number of steps as shown for 2 of us. And like I said, the other 2 of us, we just didn't have a clear conclusion.
All right, I'm going to be going over the limitations of this study. Our replication of the study performed by Krentz, Miltenberger, and Valbuena in 2016, as Nicole mentioned in the introduction, had several differences than the original study, and those are potential limitations. So in the original study, the participants consisted of 5 men with mild intellectual disabilities, ages 34 to 67. And the goal of their study was to increase the laps walked around a track each day using a token economy and social praise. The participants in our study consisted of 4 female graduate students who, instead of attending a day vocational facility, we work 4 different jobs. In our replication of the study, step count was used in replacement of laps walked around the track due to unavailability of a track for all participants. And this is a limitation in that it's not a direct replication of the original study. Another limitation includes the variety of environmental context for participants. A system was designed in the original study where cones marked a 50-meter lap around a track, ending by a visual cue, where the participants would receive their token reinforcement. And all the original participants were present in every single session in the exact same context daily. We, on the other hand, held different daily tasks, responsibilities, and environments, as we mentioned when we were describing our graphs, which could lead to possible discrepancies and unfairness in the data collection. For example, during the session time chosen of 8 a.m. to 11 a.m., one participant had a 45-minute drive to work and was unable to increase her step count during that time because she was in the car, whereas another participant who lived closer to work was able to increase her step count. And this was not due to lack of motivation necessarily, but a lack of the proper resources needed. A technical limitation with the materials of the study occurred. The device we used, as seen on the PowerPoint, was a U-track pedometer. And these were all purchased for every participant to ensure accurate and consistent data collection across participants and settings. So we thought, although this was the intention, several members of the study experienced inaccurate step counts across multiple sessions and phases. And this was tested by the participant walking and verbally counting each individual step, and then looking at the pedometer to match data, which would often result in incorrect numbers, which showed us that the U-track pedometer was not always extremely accurate. So this device malfunction is an extraneous variable that may affect the accuracy of data and therefore the outcome of our study. There's 2 more, sorry. There were procedural limitations in our preference assessments and token reinforcement system. Although a preference assessment was conducted before implementing a token economy, during the intervention phase, we all expressed at the end of the study that we weren't highly motivated by the reinforcement chosen due to satiation and lack of deprivation. In the original study, the participants experienced deprivation of their reinforcement until they earned the tokens needed to receive it. Because our replication study was self-monitored by the participants, deprivation of primary reinforcers didn't occur, and we honestly weren't motivated enough to create significant behavior change. Lastly, there is a limitation concerning our single case research design. We used an AB design, as did the original study. And the original study didn't wait for baseline data to be stable across all participants before beginning the intervention. This is a limitation of both the original study and our current study due to our desire to replicate the original study as closely as possible, as well as a time restraint that we had. The participants were unable to follow baseline standards and wait to change phases and introduce the treatment until data were stable. So for some of us, data was stable in baseline before we moved into intervention phase, but for others it wasn't. We just all took 5 baseline data points and then continued on to the intervention phase for both AB parts of the research design. So those are the limitations of this study. These are our references. Now we would like to ask Dr. Dina if she has any questions.
Wonderful. Well, now it's my turn. I was very quiet the whole time, which is not easy for me. So well done, ladies, all 4 of you. First of all, can you, it's fine. I was going to say, I wasn't sure if you could still screen share. I love how you addressed the limitations, because as you were going through your presentation, I was thinking, oh, I wonder how they're going to address that. And then you did. So you nailed it. That was excellent, because the reality is no research study is perfect, right? At the end of that study, all of the researchers, even published in the fanciest of journals, are supposed to address what were the limitations of their study. And when folks try to get around that or pretend that there were no limitations, it really brings into question, the veracity of the study. So you all were faced with very real, right, limitations, whether it was the driving or technical difficulties, other confounding variables like getting a promotion, that you could not control for. So some people could say throw the baby out with the bathwater, it's garbage. But you addressed every single one of the limitations really appropriately. So well done on that. I did have a question about the dates, and you went quickly, so I'm not sure if I missed it. I apologize. But you had mapped out the dates, and it looked like there were some gaps in the dates. Did you take a week off, or was it just over weekends? I was just curious about the gaps.
It was just over weekends. So
Okay.
we didn't take any gap in phases. It was just the weekends we did not perform.
Wonderful. So that was one question I had, because if you did have a gap, that could also be, if you took a week off, that could also be something that would limit your motivation or whatever. I am curious also, the comment you just made, Allison, about the reinforcers and preference assessment, and they weren't really, that potent reinforcers. Well, I'm curious why that happened, and did you think about trying to correct for it, or you just said, this is for a class, it's okay?
I think some of it was monetary.
Sure,
So,
fair enough.
Some things that might be highly reinforcing for us might have cost a little more than what we were willing to spend.
Absolutely. Can I ask, is anybody willing to share what some of the reinforcers you were thinking of were?
One of my reinforcers was a gift card to Weise's.
Okay, so there you have it.
It's a favorite clothing store of mine, so I did purchase that. But I purchased it at $25. So if it was a little more than that, it might have been more
prohibitive. Yep. Okay, got it. All right. Anyone else?
Mine, I have a online shopping addiction, so mine was getting to purchase something online. But my birthday is actually tomorrow, so I ordered a whole bunch of stuff a couple weeks ago. So satiated my online shopping.
Okay,
excellent. Anyone else want to share?
Yeah, for me, I did a meal at my favorite restaurant.
Okay.
But same with everybody else. I mean, I'm an adult. I can go there whenever I want. You know what I mean? So
yeah, I do know what you mean.
And as much as I would like to be motivated to go to get a meal, I, tried to be self-motivated and, not go during the week. But just because I know I can go whenever, that made it a little bit less motivating.
Right. Okay. So I'm curious if because I think this teaches a valuable lesson around our clinical practice, and you each referenced work, which I also love, because I struggle when students are doing everything hypothetically and they're not really with clients, is that how important it is really having an accurate preference assessment, keeping that updated to keep those motivators current, and really isolating those reinforcers so that you can't just have access to your favorite meal at such and such restaurant, or I've already ordered 57 things in my online shopping. So whatever, what's one more blouse or sweater? So that is right. It illustrates one of our really important points in clinical practice. We have to control for those things. In the satiation deprivation piece, right? If you, Nicole, were not allowed to, if you had put yourself in a state of deprivation, I can't online shop for the entire month before the onset of our study, you might have been quadruply motivated, right? And be like, oh my gosh, I haven't shopped in so long. So those are things that to me are far more important than limitations of your study, but taking the application of what we're learning in this class, and applying that to the real world, to clients that you're going to be working, or even to yourself as you're trying to make these behavior changes. If you had it to do over, if you're trying to do it for real, say you had a health concern and your doctor said, Allison, you really have to do this. It's not a choice, it's for your health. And you would want to take that seriously because it's not just for a class, that now you know how you could engineer it, right, differently to avoid some of the pitfalls, maybe pick a week that you don't have a promotion or limit your drive time. So it's great that you really aware all along of those things. I think your graphs were totally appropriate. No concerns there. Your lit review was spot on. One of the things I really liked was how first of all, you shared and toggled back and forth seamlessly, clearly shows that you practiced this, but also that I was reading like verbatim the slides and you were not. And that is very important when you're presenting. First of all, it shows that you know the material, that you don't have to be like, reading every word. And it shows the fluency. So you have your presenter notes or what have you, and I'm just seeing the slide. It's also a pet peeve of a lot of people out there watching presentations, whether you're going to a training, a CE event. Nobody wants to sit and listen. There are actually some new studies about talking about pulling PowerPoints from professors' lectures in colleges because students are just kind of zoning out, staring at the slides, because so many professors really do, or presenters in general really do read right from the slides word for word. And none of you did that, which was really impressive. Oftentimes in group projects, one person gets extra nervous and they kind of, freeze a little bit and do read directly from the slides. And none of you did that. So well done there also. And I liked that your slides were engaging but neat. I think sometimes people go overboard with trying to put too much on the slides, too many words, too many bullet points, or too many graphics, and then it's just busy. It's distracting. And I thought your slides struck a really nice balance between having enough, kind of meat on it to keep me interested, things to look at and read or be aware of, but not too much that I spent so much time kind of scanning the slides. So those were really well done as well. Last question, I'm curious if you thought of doing any kind of variation on the ABAB, like the ABA1B1, because you had the pedometer as one of your kind of motivators, because it's giving you that output, 27 steps, 600 steps, whatever. But then you also had your social praise, your texting each other or what have you variable. I'm just curious if you considered, or yes, no, or why, kind of splitting those out, where if you just had a pedometer only phase and then had pedometer plus, the social praise from within the group phase, if you think the results would be different.
I think we wanted to try and replicate the study as closely as possible. So excellent. I don't think that it was even considered.
Okay. I think that's a fair answer. What do you think now?
One of the studies that we actually used as a supporting evidence did do that, where they split up just the pedometers, then they did pedometers and contingency management, and then pedometers, contingency management, and then like virtual coaching, which I think was Courtney and Valerie. If I'm pretty sure that's the one it was. But yeah, like she said, we wanted to follow it as closely as possible, and that's why.
And so in their findings, did they find that the combo pack, as we like to call it, was that more effective?
Yes, so they found that the contingency management in conjunction with the pedometer made it that more effective than just using the pedometer.
Excellent. So despite your confounding variables, environmental and technical complications, you were still able to show some change, right? And when you averaged your baseline steps and your, intervention steps, there was a change, whether it's statistically significant or whatever remains to be seen. But that's despite your limitations. So if you were able to fine tune and avoid all of those limitations, you probably would have had even more robust results showing a nice effect of your intervention. So excellent. Do any any of you have any questions or concerns about the project, the study, how it went, any confusion about it, replicating a study or writing it up or the slides or anything? No? Excellent. All right. See, and you were the first group to present, and you had your little technical difficulty at the beginning, but we all breathed through it. That does not impact your grade in any way. I'm human. We all have these things happen. And now you're done. So you don't have to worry about doing this anymore. So you'd be like, oh, whew, it's done. Tell me the truth. Like, whatever. Was it hard? Are you fine? Like, some people get really nervous with this, especially being on webcam, and they're like, oh, is my hair right? Or, whatever. It's remarkable how self-conscious people get about presenting and about being webcam, and you had to do both at the same time. So if you were rating this experience as students, is this like, oh God, I hope I never have another class that makes us do this, or it was fine, or I liked it? What are your thoughts?
I don't think I particularly like it. It does make me a little nerve-wracking. I have a daughter, so I'm always like, make sure you don't talk.
Yep.
So I have that going on, but I think overall it wasn't
too stressful.
Yeah, it wasn't too stressful, but it's
Okay.
not something I particularly enjoy.
All right. Anyone else want to share? Just because I really value student feedback, and if we got kind of unanimous student feedback for or against, then that's something the department should know so that we can, make adjustments if need be. So I'm just curious how you all feel.
I was a little nervous, but I also know that I did this in something similar, like the broadcasting live during the summer, and I also have another one in a couple weeks. So it's just something that I'm getting used to. So it's bad.
So tolerable, not torture.
Yeah, it's tolerable.
Okay.
I think
all right.
Hangouts really makes
no,
it
that's fine. That's totally fair feedback. Absolutely. Anyone else?
I liked this project because when I previously used the Google Hangouts and the live broadcasting, it was a debate. So that was a lot more difficult, and we were kind of like working against each other, but with each other. This was just more like a collaborative effort and less nerve-wracking.
Well, and I will say, Nicole, you looked very comfortable when you were presenting. Absolutely, you did. And it's funny because you can tell some people, like I am always fidgeting with my glasses because my eyelashes or whatever, but you seemed very comfortable presenting and being on camera. So, and it is, I will say, and you all seem to be saying the same thing, like not your favorite thing, but you didn't hate it. It is a good practice, right? Because once you become BCBAs, which you all will, you'll get there, in your each timeline. Is you have to do these things, maybe not on webcam, but nobody becomes a BCBA to stay in direct service, right, for the rest of their careers, to be the technician. So you're going to function as a trainer, as a consultant, and if you go further down the road and end up teaching, right, I have to do these things all the time, so it's good practice. And I'm glad it wasn't torture. Allison, you didn't chime in. I'm curious your take on it, because you seemed nervous with just the technical difficulties at the beginning, but then very comfortable once you were presenting. So I'm curious your take on it.
Yes, I'm definitely not the most experienced when it comes to the technical side, but somehow I ended up doing it. I don't know, but it worked out. But for the project, like everybody else said, presentations aren't my favorite. But the content, I feel like, wasn't too difficult because it went hand in hand with things we've been working on for like the entire semester. So presenting it was like the smallest task, you know what I mean? The bigger tasks were like meeting and writing the paper and doing all that. So the presentation just kind of.
And that, I guess, is my last thought, which I'm, again, looking for feedback. Do we love group projects? Do we tolerate, or do we hate group projects? Because I've gotten real mixed feedback from students. Some people like no group projects ever. Other people are going to bring down my grade, and other people love the collaboration. So I'm curious, just aside from the presenting aspect, but the group work. Do we like it or hate it?
I think it's good practice for us in the future because we are going to be collaborating with other professionals. The downfall to group projects via this format is just collaborating our schedules. So typically in the workplace, we all have similar schedules. So that was of a difficulty, but we made it work.
Okay.
I would say this group was probably the easiest I've ever worked with.
Oh, yay for all of you. That's nice. That's really positive feedback because you can have a group that just doesn't mesh well, and that's not good for anybody, but we really do try to randomly assign. In some universities, cohorts of students travel together, so they stay in groups and then they develop rapport. But if you think about if it was a bad group to start and you're stuck with that cohort, that could be disastrous. Anyone else have an opinion on group work? No? Okay, so my thought, interestingly, is, and I agree, Courtney, I am much more comfortable with group projects and group work when you're in a more on campus or in a workplace situation, because I was worried for all of you. I have not had a course do this before where there was online group work, and I was worried, how are people going to navigate that, work schedules, and when you're available for meetings, and you all made it work clearly, and you had a lovely end product. But I had that concern myself, thinking, oh, how would I, have to manage all of those moving parts? So thank you for that feedback. Well done, everyone. If you think of any other lingering questions or what have you, please feel free to reach out via email. Have your video recorded so good from here out, unless you guys have any other questions for me.
Nope.
All right, excellent. Well, thank you. I'm glad we're able to make it work. And now I have my Google for all of the other groups. I'm actually going to send an email out and say, everybody send the invite to this new Gmail, and they'll have an easier time. But thank you all for the great work and the time tonight, and have a great rest of your week.
Thank you. You too.
You're more than welcome. Good night.
Good night.